Welcome to Blatant-ish, a podcast where my mom and I discuss our opinions on a variety of topics while attempting to navigate a generational gap of 18 years. Sometimes we agree, more often we don't. But either way, we're taking you along for the ride. So remember to brush your teeth, and let's get blatant-ish. So, how you doing today, Mom?
Doing great. Thanks for asking.
How are the kids?
I don't know. You tell me.
I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking. So our topic for today is maintaining positive relationships and navigating the changing dynamics between parents and children who are becoming adults.
Growing pains.
So yeah, we're just going to kind of talk about maintaining that relationship with, your parent when you get into adulthood. I think we navigated that pretty well, so maybe we can have some advice for how that works.
Well, let's get into it.
All right. I'm going to kind of talk about my life from beginning to now and like how I thought about you and Dad and my parents, and kind of I took that approach from like my viewpoint of the different stages of my life.
Sure. And mine is from the parental point of view. So
yeah, how the different parenting stages and stuff. So like I think at the beginning as like a child, your parents are kind of your world. Like if they're sad, you're sad. What they feel, you're going to feel. And it's I always remember, Dad growing up, the big thing he'd tell me, he was Spider-Man.
Yes.
Dad was Spider-Man, and he, anytime Spider-Man would come on, Dad would be like, "Look, that's me. I used to, when I was younger, I'd web sling through New York, blah blah blah," and I believed that. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, you're not gonna. Your Dad is Spider-Man. That was the truth. That's the way it worked. And like early on, you don't have you're not going to school at first. You don't have friends, so your parents are kind of your social group. They're kind of your people. You're bigger than life, and you can't really do anything wrong. So like that's the way my mind I remember being when I was like young.
Right. Those days were difficult time. Like one of the first difficult times, because as a parent, we're also, in addition to trying to set boundaries and rules and, teach you things and stuff like that, we're also trying to figure things out for ourselves as well. It's like we're trying to figure out how to learn to balance life, jobs, social groups, who does what in the house, who's going to wash the dishes today, who's going to vacuum the floor. So it's a very transformative time for parents as well. And you're going through that.
Yeah, I absolutely.
I was like, you're going through that now.
Redefining, having the kid, you got to redefine your relationships with your significant other, with your spouse. Absolutely. Because like everything changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I get that part of the parental side of things too. Yeah. And then as that kind of progresses into like adolescence, I remember another story we kind of relating around Dad, where I was sitting outside of like middle school. I was on my phone and I was texting Dad, and I had him in my phone as Daddy, because my whole young life I called him my daddy. And I remember somebody, I don't remember who it was, but they walked up to me and they're like, "Oh, you're texting your daddy," and I was so ashamed. I was like, oh my God, I can't let it. So went through my phone and everything, changed it to Dad. That's when I started calling you guys Mom and Dad.
Right.
And that's that point where you guys, for like social stuff, kind of became secondary. I started to get these friends and these primary social groups. You guys aren't like my whole world anymore at that point, and realization that like you guys are humans. Mm-hmm. Other humans in the world, not these bigger than life parental features that you kind of feel like when you're a young kid. And even it kind of switches to the point where I suddenly get the idea that these 16 and 15 and 14-year-olds that I'm hanging out with know more about life than you and Dad do.
Yeah, I remember. The story I like to tell was, you were younger than that, though, where you come home one day and you said, most of my classmates were born in 1994. And I'm like, okay. And you're like, so I had to have been born in 1994. And I'm like, no. You were born in 1993. I was there.
No,
and you are, which you always was very argumentative and PowerPoints. I mean, but you argued me down on the fact that, yeah, I was born in 94. to the point where you were so passionate that you started crying about it. And I was like, Nick, I'm your mom. I gave birth to you.
I was in the room.
But your friends, anything your friends told you, that was gospel.
Yeah, that's the way it works. I think that's the big difference from being like, really young, 3, 4, 5, 6, getting into those, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, all the way up through high school. It's kind of this realization that suddenly all these friends I'm making have to know better. And that I'm right and they're right, and my mom and dad are just humans. They don't know what they're talking about. Now that changes again when I got to be like 18, 20, 19, 20. I went off to college for the first time at community college, and it's like immediately like I hit that 18th birthday, and it's like I'm an adult now, and that realization kind of hits you, and it's like it's in the back of your head until you finally like say it. It's like I can do what I want. You can't tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. It's like a card that I've now got put into my wallet that I could pull out at a moment's notice and say like, "Ha ha! No, I don't have to listen to you." And I had to kind of when I got out at the college, I was staying at the dorms and stuff. I really got into this mindset that this is my time to be selfish, and because this is my life, this is my future, it's my time. So like I need to get out and do my own stuff. And I remember that you specifically struggled with this a lot.
Oh, absolutely. And if I can back up a minute, even with adolescence, when you were in high school before you turned 18, it was a difficult time then too, because for me and your dad, it was really hard because we were struggling to give you autonomy and let you explore your surroundings and give you, as we like to say, just enough rope to hang yourself. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But that balance between still maintaining some control, but also letting you spread your wings and fly a little bit.
Sure.
So, of course, as you know as well as I do, there's a lot of power struggle going on there because you're starting to get this independence, and some disagreements start to ensue.
Sure.
You and your dad butted heads quite a bit during that time.
Oh, yeah, a ton. Lots of stuff.
And another point, at this time, for me, it was like the empty nest is starting to become a real reality. And that's scary because, it goes along like my identity. All I've been is a mom. And then, oh my goodness, now I have adults. I have adult children.
We're like, we're going off. We're getting jobs. We're in college. We're having relationships. You don't know where we're at 24/7. And
that's really when the feelings as a parent of inadequacy kind of pop in. You start feeling like, well, they don't need you anymore. And, you start having trouble with not being that person in control. And that causes some problems as well. And
that's funny to me because, like, to me, from my viewpoint, like, I still don't know if I feel like I don't need you. Like, I don't know if like, obviously I'm living on my own. I'm about to be married. I've got a baby.
5 roads over from your mom.
5 roads over. Yeah, exactly. Look where I've ended up. And it comes back to that time in college. I remember missing home and missing that security a lot. Like when I would call you constantly, and I would want to come home, and most weekends I would want to come home, and then like the few times I wouldn't, you would get upset. Like you missed me and you wanted me home, and a lot of the times I wanted to come home too. But you guys were always good at giving me that place to run to, and I think while giving me the freedom to explore who I was, and I think that's really important because
safety net.
Yeah, if I didn't have that safety net, if I didn't know that I could come home and I could always come back and I was always welcome there, no matter what I got into or what I did, like I don't know if I would have been as willing to explore and try to figure out who I was as much.
Sure.
I had room to make mistakes because I had people who were there to catch me. And that's, I think, the first big struggle, because that's the point where it's like the parent's not completely in control, and you have to kind of let go and let, in this case, me go and make mistakes. And you can't always fix that. You can't always stop me from making mistakes anymore. You have to let it happen.
Right, and that's a hard lesson to learn as a parent, because you always want to fix these things for them, and
for sure.
that's difficult. But you were talking about finding yourself. Not only are you exploring the world around you and trying to find your place, as a parent, you start redefining your roles and trying to find yourself. Because for me personally, like I said, my entire adult life, I've been a parent, been a mom. And that's been my whole identity. So here I am, my late 30s, early 40s, and I'm like, well, what do I do now? Because all I know is being a mom, and so it was a time where I had to kind of redefine who I was as well. While you were out finding yourself, I had to do the same.
And I think it's different for me. That's different for me. I don't think I have that same experience because you
don't have a child that's an adult yet.
Well, no. But like you had me at like 17, at 18.
I was 18. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had Avery at 28 years old.
Right.
So like
it's a different dynamic.
I think it's really different. And I think maybe when Avery is an adult, in 18 years from now, I think I've had an experience with finding myself and doing the college stuff that you didn't have. So maybe being able to fit like back into that, like pre-Avery mindset might be easier for me.
Maybe so.
Who knows, man? I'm sure there's still going to be struggle. But I like with your situation, your entire adult life, it was high school and then mom.
Right.
Yeah, there was nothing.
Yeah.
There was no going to college and doing that kind of stuff for you. You did that with kids.
One semester. Yeah.
Yeah, you did that with kids.
Right.
So, yeah, I can imagine redefining yourself as. I didn't even think of that when I was prepping the show notes, but that's a cool point.
But I mean with adult children, adjusting to these new roles is the most difficult part.
Yeah, I think that's really and like now I put on here age 24 plus.
Yes.
Like because this is where my life as an adult is really starting. Like these last couple of years.
And I had to come to the realization I'm no longer the most important person in your life.
Yeah, no. Like especially now, like I've got Avery, and I'm the kind of the head of a household, and I've got X, Y, and Z going on, and I look at our relationship. I put on here. It's like a partnership-ish, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're still my mom, and I still reach out to you probably for more stuff than you come to me for help with. But it's a partnership. We're helping each other.
We're equals now.
Yeah, and that's like we're two adults more so than at any other point in the relationship. We're both two adults, and that's what it kind of comes down to. And like for me, I'm thinking a lot about like I want to care for my new family, but I also want to be a part of y'all's lives, and that's why we moved so close. Because still being involved, and the big things in my mind recently is that the time I have with you guys is always getting shorter. Right? And again, when I went through the thing with my tumor, and went through what I call my mortality crisis, it's like time is precious, and I want to spend as much of that as I can with you guys while I still have it.
Absolutely.
And then there's thoughts of like returning the favor to you guys since you spent your life raising us and being getting us to where we are. I always feel like I have a responsibility to kind of give back to you and Dad in some ways, and like that kind of defines the way I think about our relationship now as kind of can I get to a point in my life where I can provide for y'all like y'all provided for me?
Sure.
Yeah, and that's a big focus, as opposed to it almost kind of comes full circle from like you are there to protect me and provide for me, and I want to get to the point where I can return that favor if and when you need that.
And I can tell you from experience, it's a very empowering feeling because with my own mom, it got to a point where I was, doing everything for her, and even financially, there was times I did things for her. Of course, like you said, time is short. We lost her back in February to COVID. It's really difficult when you get on that side of things. It's a whole nother new dynamic at that point because it's almost like you become the parent of your parents. Now, you try that a little bit now. You try to do that some now, and I have to remind you, I'm 46, almost 47. Dial it back. I'm not over the hill,
Not putting you in the home yet.
But when you do that, I know it's coming from a place of love and concern for something that, Dad and I need to do or approach or something like that. But it's definitely a different dynamic when you have to start parenting your parents.
Right.
And it does happen.
Oh, yeah.
It really does happen.
Yeah. And me being me, I think there are times where I'm right. Like I'm right, and I need to say something to you, and then you don't want to hear it, and I think that's, again, like we talked about before, there's like a dynamic there where you can't do that when you're like 10 years old. You can't go to your mom and be like, this is how you need to do something. But now that I'm like 28, I'm like, hey, this thing is happening, and maybe you should consider doing this, or like, and sometimes I'm like, hey, do this, and you're like, excuse you, and yeah, I need to be checked on it a little bit.
Because I'm like, you barely have your own shit together, why are you giving me advice on something,
right?
And we can sit and laugh about it, but there's been some tense.
Oh no, yeah,
a lot of and like you and I are very much alike, so if we're gonna butt heads,
sure.
But we work through it and we move on. But I'm now the consultant, not the CEO.
Yeah, you're there. I call you up and I'm saying, hey, I need some advice on this.
Yeah, hey, can you come look at the baby? Blah, 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 blah. He's got this rash or, whatever. But that takes some reckoning as well, too. But I love that. When I read that article. Mm-hmm. Consultant. Have the mindset of a consultant versus the CEO. I'm not making the rules anymore.
If you've been enjoying the show so far, you should take a minute to check out our affiliate link down below from Ice-T Aesthetics. Ice-T Aesthetics offers quality garments featuring awesome art from young, new artists with a dark anime Japanese style. Their t-shirts and hoodies are some of my favorite, and if you use the code Blatant10 on checkout, you can get 10% off your next purchase. We get a small kickback for any purchases made, and this is an awesome way to support us while grabbing some cool swag.
Another more direct way to support us is by subscribing to our Patreon at patreon.com/Blatant-ish. We'll be posting bloopers, extended cuts, and eventually episodes released a day early. Now, back to the show. As the adult child, what do you feel about advice?
Advice from you
as
a parent? I don't have a problem with advice because, like, if it's like life advice or like financial advice, I don't have any issues with that because you've lived more life and dealt with finances more than me. And like as an adult, it's just like getting advice from a friend or someone else at this point. If I don't like it, I won't take it.
Well, and so because in my research for this episode, I read this book called Walking on Eggshells, and it said in regards to unsolicited advice, don't give it. They don't like it. They don't want it. They resent it. And I was just curious how you feel about that.
I think in our relationship, like me, you, and Dad, that I've always tried to be good at taking advice and listening to what you guys have to say and weighing your opinions.
You are.
You guys kind of raised us more democratically. So, like, even from an early age, I've had a say. And since I had a say, I listen to what you guys say and I take it to heart. And from a young age, I either did it or I didn't. So I don't look at the advice as unsolicited from you guys. I think that we have an open forum that's a two-way street. If I have advice, whether it's solicited or not, I'm going to speak my mind and say it to you as well. And that's because we enjoy that kind of two-way street. I don't mind the advice. And again, I also don't mind telling you that I don't plan on doing it. That's the point of advice. Again, you're not telling me what to do. I'm just kind of...
When you ask for advice, are you asking or are you looking for validation?
Both. There's definitely times I've come to you with like something set in my mind that I'm going to do, and I've asked your opinion, and hearing you say, I would do this, and it lines up with what I'm doing is definitely validating me and gives me to pursue it. There's times I've come to you and asked for... looking for that validation, and you said something completely opposite to what I was planning on doing, and I still go through and do that thing the way I was planning on doing it. But so there's definitely times I come looking for like the validation, and hearing you or Dad say that the way I've come up with to solve something is how you would do it. Sometimes validates and makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing. There are other times where I'm like, oh, they agree with me. That's scary. It just depends.
Well, because in the book, it talks about how, the walking on eggshells, how oftentimes when your adult children ask for advice, they don't really want advice. They're looking for validation as opposed to you giving them advice.
I would never want to come to you and ask you for something and then you just agree with me to give me some false sense of validation.
I don't think I would ever do that. Our relationship isn't that way.
And when you say like that I don't want advice, I want validation. That's what it sounds like to me.
Well, and that's kind of essentially what they're saying.
And I don't agree with that.
It goes on to be like, they're telling you, hey, be forward, ask if they want advice or allegiance. And I find that that's a little harsh. Could you imagine me saying that when you say, hey, Mom, what do you think about feeding the baby meat? He's like 11 months old and we haven't really introduced meat, just as an example. And I'm like, do you really want my advice or you want allegiance?
I think if I was looking for support, I think I would engage differently. And I would say like, look, I've decided to do this thing and I need someone to back me up on it. Or, hey, I need some help, or can you support me with this? Like I feel like if I want validation from you and I want some support, that I will engage differently than saying like, hey, how do you feel about this? Or I need some advice. I'm going through this. If I ask for advice, I want advice. If I want support, I would ask for support.
We're really straightforward though. What comes up comes out.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that more people should be like that.
Agreed. Absolutely.
I think a lot of problems come from people not being very straightforward. A lot of problems that people run into, for sure. Which leads into what I think the keys to successfully navigating relationships between parents and adult children are.
Sure.
And I kind of broke it down into like 5 things. The first one's honesty.
Important in any relationship.
Any relationship, absolutely. Yes. And when it comes to like kids being of any age, we always know. Like if you're lying, like the kids are more perceptive of that than parents realize.
Sure.
I
know when you're lying, but
you
and your sister, because I said this to your sister recently, y'all are very intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
A situation recently, and you were asking questions, and you were like, that don't check out what's really going on.
Yeah, and I think
you're very intuitive.
I think that I put kids always know, but parents always find out.
Yes,
the same thing. Like parents are, if you're lying to your parent, they're going to find out. And that comes to don't shelter each other. There's a time when kids are young enough that you can shelter them from parts of the world, but you've got to at some point stop sheltering. You've got to understand this is how things are, and that works both sides.
But parents may look at that not as sheltering, but as protecting.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference.
Sure.
I think you can protect people from something, but if you're trying to pretend something doesn't exist, there's a problem.
But to some people, those are interchangeable.
And then I guess to me, it's not. I think I can protect somebody from something without
versus sheltering.
I think there's a difference. And again, this applies to each other. So I don't think that as an adult, as me right now, I think that if I'm trying to shelter and pretend with you that I'm not going through something, or like if I'm struggling financially and I try to pretend like I'm not, it's almost like sheltering your parents from stuff. And I just don't agree with it. I think you have to tell the hard truth. I think that's really key when you're struggling with something, or I think the honesty is key.
Honesty is always key.
Yeah.
But sometimes from the parent perspective, some things are better left unsaid.
Maybe. Yeah, and that might just be I'm brutally honest in general.
You are.
In like all relationships.
And
friends, romantic relationships, all of it.
Oh, you are. And that's...
I'm brutally honest.
You get that from your dad.
Yeah, I say what I feel. And yeah, when I was young, I took the same approach. Honesty. Like I would rather tell you guys about something and take the punishment than you find out about it 3 weeks later and get double the punishment.
You were always that way.
Yeah.
You were brutally honest, even if it meant got in trouble for it.
It's just easier. It's better.
There were a lot of things that you come to me with that I was like cringing, but I knew that if I wanted you to come to me for the very important thing next time,
absolutely.
that I had to sit there and cringe and listen to it.
Yeah,
there were times I'm like, maybe you should go. Like the time you had a bump on your,
you know what,
your curlies, down there. I was like, go show that to your dad.
So moving on, respect.
Another key thing in any relationship.
And where I'm gonna start with this one, kids deserve respect. Kids do.
They do.
Your children do. And on both sides, I don't think it's a right. It's something that's earned. In the sense that, like, if you do something to challenge that respect, or you do something that you disrespect your parent or you disrespect your child, like there's got to be, you got to kind of earn it back sometimes.
Agreed.
Yeah, like your kids don't automatically have to respect you if you're doing things to them that are bad.
Right.
Or you're doing things that are outwardly hurting them.
Or not respecting boundaries. And
on top of that, I think that as a parent, you have to understand sometimes, like, kids are going to give you, like, I think the default position is kids are going to give you that respect.
And see, I disagree with that because they're not automatically going to default to respect.
I think that kids, you can force it. You can force your kids to be respectful, but that causes problems. Like you can make it so that the kid respects you, but it can be a fake respect versus a true, like, earned respect for one another.
Yeah, and that's kind of a big issue for me, and I think you know that, because how many times have we gotten into a little scrap, and I'm just like, I deserve, you've been really disrespectful. I deserve more respect for that. And, maybe my approach could have been different, but... I was like, I'm your mom. Look at all the things I've done for you, which is a pretty shitty thing to say to start with, I'll admit.
No, but there's merit in that too. Like, if you're parenting and you're doing a good job, that is earning the respect. It's when it's if you're not.
Right.
If you're not doing the job of a parent.
Right. Just
because you bumped uglies doesn't necessarily mean that this child now has to respect you. I've always felt that way.
No, and your dad was very strong about those concepts as well. It's just like, they don't if you're a shitty person and you're acting out around them, then no, you don't have to, automatically give them respect.
And then on both viewpoints, from the parent and the child's perspective, if someone is giving you respect, if someone is respecting you, don't turn around and take advantage of that.
Right.
And that's where I think it's easier sometimes as a parent maybe to take advantage of that, because of the fact that your child is giving you respect, and then you get into the headspace that this is how it's going to always be.
Or how it should be.
Or how it should be. Versus, are both parties meeting their job? Right. Parents and children both have to meet.
But on the flip side, where, adult children are wanting to set boundaries, I think it's important for parents to set boundaries too, because if not, you're going to get taken advantage of.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've talked to you openly. I mean, we talked about this just the other day. There's been times that I felt like you were taking some advantage. It was like you were taking a little bit of advantage of myself and your dad and the generosity. But the great thing is we can say those things to each other, and we can work on it.
Communication. I have enough respect for you that if you're telling me that you feel taken advantage of, I'm going to listen to that and try to reel that in.
Right. And I'm learning the opposite, to do that for you and your sister, for that matter.
Sure.
That's a hard lesson as a parent to learn.
The next one was trust. Honesty, respect, and then trust. I think of trust as a line of credit. I think trust is the first credit. It's more important than like credit. You got to build this trust.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, and it works both ways. If you do something that is disingenuous, or you break trust with anybody, your trust credit score is going to drop.
Of course.
And then you've got to prove to be trustworthy to build that back up. And once you've lost trust, it takes longer to build back up.
Right.
When you drop to that 500, it's going to take a while to get back to 600, as opposed to hanging out there. Yeah, and it works both ways. Kids are kind of allowed more of it, because kids are going to make mistakes.
Yes.
And I think early on, there's an expectation on the parent that isn't on the kid. The kid's allowed to make mistakes. The parent doesn't really get as many.
We don't get as much grace as you kids do.
No, yeah, parents don't. Parents don't get as much grace, and maybe they should, but that's kind of how it works. Like, you are the one that has the responsibility.
Right.
At a certain point, the kid doesn't have that.
And let me interject. That responsibility doesn't stop just because your kids are adults. Sometimes you have to continue to extend them grace and make the apology, be the person, just stand up.
But I think
if
once
it's helpful
the children become an adult, that's where that grace begins to go both ways. Because once I'm an adult, like, the responsibility to treat you like an equal adult is now on me as well.
Right.
But everyone makes mistakes.
Sure.
And like I said, you can always build that back up.
Right.
That trust. But you've got to trust each other. And the last two things that I fall into that. It's support and acceptance. Supporting each other doesn't necessarily mean you agree. But we have the same goals. We're on the same team, so we support one another. Right. And maybe sometimes in like public, that means that you support your kids, and then you go home and have a conversation about why what they did was wrong. But you don't pull your kids out in public and like say, "Oh, you're dumb. You did this wrong." Like this. Absolutely. Support your kids, and vice versa. When you get to be adults, like support each other, and then have a conversation later if something needs to change or if you don't agree. That's probably like relationship advice too. I think that support is really important,
and that's in your work life too. Because I had a situation recently where that was the case. Where I was called out because I'm new and nobody knows me, and I'm like, you could have pulled me to the side and had that conversation.
Absolutely.
But yeah, for sure.
And then acceptance. Your kids or your parents aren't you. People are different, and you have to kind of learn to love.
That's a great point.
You have to learn people for who they are.
Because you aren't just this different, this little small version of me or your dad. You are you.
Yeah.
And I have to accept you the way you are.
And you have to learn to love people for who they are. You can't always fix people. And the last thing is, of course, even within these relationships, sometimes we have to run into, all this being said, I'm not one of these people who necessarily say that you have to have a good relationship with somebody. There's a difference between difference and hatefulness,
right?
And and if you're experiencing hate or you're someone, if you were just hateful to me, we wouldn't be sitting here having a podcast,
right?
And when you become an adult, I don't have to deal with that anymore.
No, and in my own life with my own mother, God rest her soul. There were times
you balance some of that.
Yes, there were times where I had to distance myself from her because she was being toxic. She was making life more difficult, and I have a job and I have children and I have all these and my own stressors. And if you're going to be toxic, then you need to figure out look inside yourself and fix what's going on, and then we can have a relationship. So I have had to distance myself from her,
yeah, absolutely,
over the years. And when she was ready to apologize and fix things, then we solved everything. And I think for me, overall, the takeaway from all of this is, in order to foster a healthy relationship with your adult children or child, you kind of just got to have an attitude of genuine love and respect. Maybe keeping some of your unsolicited advice to yourself. You see that they need to grow and change, but don't push. They're going to have to do it in their own time. Right. And one of the biggies is resist being judgmental. And it's easy to slip into that because you think, look, they really ought to be doing this a little different. Recent example between you and I, maybe you ought to do a little better saving money and not spending so much.
No, for sure.
But thinking back on it, I'm like, I was a little bit judgmental. I wasn't there. I don't know the situation. And then I think, like we already talked about, having respect for boundaries, that's just the most important. When you have adult children, having respect for their boundaries is key.
Yeah. So overall, I believe, to kind of sum up everything that I've said, to have the reason that we have a good relationship, and if you're trying to foster a good relationship with your parents as a child who is grown up and is coming into their mid-20s, late 30s, and you want to continue to have a good relationship with your parents, be honest with them, give them respect, give them some trust, listen to them, support your parents, and accept who they are sometimes. I mean, there's generational gaps. Sometimes that's hard, but just keep in mind your parents are human and they make mistakes too, and you have to learn to work with who they are. Unconditional love, yeah, no matter
it's what we give our children, and we should give our parents that too.
Yeah, even if they make mistakes sometimes.
Agreed. Good talk. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review on your listening platform of choice. After that, go call your mom.
You scrub.
Treat others with kindness and always be blatant-ish.